So hello and welcome to another Valorant tips and tricks video. Today we're going to be talking about attacking on Ascent, and I'm going to do a series of these videos for each of the maps, talking about attacking each map and then defending each map as well. We'll go in alphabetical order, so we'll start with Ascent here, and basically we're just going to assume that you have a standard comp. I'm not actually going to put any specific abilities in there. This is just a kind of map awareness type video for you all, so we're not going to talk about like specific abilities. Oh, and then if you silver dart here, and if you sky flash here, then you can do this. None of that. We're going to just make it very general, very generic. We're just going to assume that you have a pretty normal comp that has some amount of controllers, some amount of duelists, some amount of sentinels, and some amount of initiators, and go from there and talk about what's going on in the maps, the different maps, and how to play on them, and key things that you might need to consider if you are going to be successful on certain maps. And so first up, we're talking about attacking on Ascent. And interesting enough, and you probably might not know this, but Ascent is actually the most defender-sided map, or at least it was in the Valorant Champions, and it was by quite some way, because every other map other than Fracture, which of course is new, and so things are still a bit dicey on that map, every other map aside from Fracture was within a 48-52 split. Either they were that level or they were closer to 50-50 than that as well, aside from Ascent, which was 55% for the defenders and only 45% for the attackers. Now, of course, there was various reasons why that was, and of course the sample size isn't too massive, so I wouldn't take too much from it, but it's quite interesting that at least at the pro level, it seems like the defenders do have a bit of an edge. But let's get into attacking on Ascent then, and looking at the map. And the first thing we always need to consider when we're talking about any map, really, and what's going on, is understanding the different ways that attackers can go, and talking about the choke points that then come from those different ways. So obviously, we can go B. If we're the attackers, we can go into B main. We can come through to mid from two options, but generally I'm going to consider this mid area here as kind of one main way the attackers can go, because you can quite easily transfer between, you can quite easily go from here to here. You can go up here to here, so it's not that big of a deal. So I'm just going to call mid number 2, and obviously we have A as well with number 3. And then we need to look at the various choke points as well. So obviously we have one key choke point there on B main, normally in ranked games at least, but interestingly not at the pro level, but we'll get into that when we talk about defending on Ascent. We have the second one here by the archway. Obviously we have the A short choke point there, and then of course A main as well. So there's 4 main sort of choke points for us to breach as attackers, and once we've got these ones, particularly on mid, then we can start looking at certain options. We can come 2 different ways here, we can come 2 different ways here as well. So once we've sort of breached these choke points, there does become more options for us, although these options, aren't always the clearest to go to. Like, this going up A short here towards heaven and whatnot is pretty risky a lot of the times, because defenders, will have normally pretty good control of this area, even if you do manage to breach this choke point. So, there are risks still involved with some of these decisions, but let's talk about these choke points and how we might go about getting past them. So a crucial thing you might notice straight away is, of course, that 2 of our choke points, 2 of our 4 choke points, are located by taking control of mid. And this is the first point we really are going to hit on, and that is the importance of taking mid control on the map Ascent, because as I mentioned, 2 of your 4 ways that you can go as attackers, or your main sort of options to go for, are located within mid, and so therefore if you can take mid control, then you are going to open up your options a lot more. And so my first suggestion for anyone attacking on this map is to try and take mid control. Take the time to do that. Don't go into a rush. Of course, this isn't going to be every single round. You can't just do the same thing over and over and over again. Eventually, your opponents will adapt, and they, will start doing different things themselves, and, taking whatever you're doing away from you. So I wouldn't suggest, do this every single round, but in general, I think that you want to be taking mid control on Ascent, because 50% of your options are located here. And so what I'd be trying to do early on in any round is to try and get this area to be controlled by yourselves, because once you have this area as a part of your sort of space, as your area, then you open up your options a lot. And I don't know if any of you noticed this. Maybe when you're playing on defense, even, you might have noticed this more, but anytime that the attackers do take this space and have control over this area, all of a sudden, like, where they're going and what they're doing becomes a lot more shrouded in mystery for the defenders, because they could do anything. They could do an A split, they could do a B split, they could just push down mid. There is a lot of different things all of a sudden available to attackers as soon as they get this space, and that is what is important, is getting this space. And so what I would do if I were you, if I was attacking on Ascent, is try to take this space early on in the round and spend that time, spend your resources, your utility on trying to get this space early on, and then have options open to you that can allow you to attack in a lot of different ways. So we know that mid is an important place to take early on, but something else I want to point out is the ultimate orbs on this map. As I've just mentioned, this map is somewhat defenders sided, but we are given a bit of a cookie by the devs here on Ascent, because this orb here on A is perhaps the easiest in the game for any side to take, because it is very attack sided. The defenders have to play very risky if they want to stop this orb from being collected by the attackers, and normally that's just not going to happen, and you're going to get this orb for free. And so if you have an agent that has a particularly powerful ultimate ability, you should be probably farming this orb as much as you can, because you will need as much advantage as you can attacking on this map. But now let's look at attacking the two sites. We know that taking mid is important because that's going to open up our options quite a lot. But what if we wanted to do an attack on B site? Now, when we look at B site and we move up the map here towards B site, one thing that you'll notice is that B site is incredibly hard to get to, and this is an important point, I think, because as you can see, this choke point is quite far pushed up, and so normally it's not too hard for attackers to, reach this area without too much trouble. But compare this to the choke point of your other mid choke point, it's actually quite far away. Whereas on A, they're kind of at a similar sort of spacing, the one on B takes you a long time to get all the way around to here to where you can help your players attack on B. And this is just one reason that I think attacking on B on this map is particularly difficult, because people don't really wait the time for their allies to, start to get towards this area, where then you can start to really, formulate a coordinated attack and a coordinated push. Rather, they will, be like, oh, well, they're in mid, they're starting to get progress, and start an attack when their allies might be somewhere like here. They get mowed down by the people on B, then this person gets mowed down by people, on mid, and then you lose the round and you wonder why you lost. And I think that this is a common reason why that is the case. Also, when we're attacking B, it's important to note that I think that this choke point here is an absolute death mill for most attacking teams. And the reason that is, and a reason that I really don't think that really anytime you should just do a full 5-stack push B. Maybe on pistol rounds it's okay, but anytime there's a guns involved, I really don't advise just pushing B. At least not as a 5-stack, because the reason is, if we look at common positions that defenders might be playing, and can look at B main and attack you on B main. I'm just highlighting the different positions that defenders could be here. Well, the thing is, all of these angles can attack B main, and you have a lot of different things to clear, and there's more angles than this. You could also be near the switch as well, and you just look at all the different angles that they can attack you from. It's not going to be a great time to come out of, because you have so many different things to check upon. And then once you even maybe have got past that, which of course sometimes you will, because you'll just win your gunfights, then there's even areas that the defenders can hide on site, and you have to then clear site as well. It's just like a constant grind to even try and plant on this B site, because it does feel very defender sided. So if you are going to attack B, what I would say is that you always should do a split. There should always be, at least one person trying to get in through mid, that it can at least distract, maybe the defender here obviously will either be distracted or killed, and might distract any defenders here as well. But the interesting point is, if you look at a lot of the different angles that I just highlighted, they still probably will mostly be focused on B main, and so I do really think that you have to wait for a B split to come in if you really want to be successful attacking this site. But let's say you have been successful and have managed to take over the site, you've planted the spike and all is well. Well, then we have another problem with this B site, and again, just another reason I think attacking on this map is quite difficult, is that this site is perhaps the one where it is the hardest to gain space. Because if you think about, once you've planted a spike on this site, often your space will be something like this. You will be incredibly hemmed in, and I'm sure many of you in post-plant scenarios have felt incredibly trapped in this tiny little space, whilst the defenders, and I'll put them in a different color here, let's do it for blue, the defenders seem to get all of this space often for free in post-plant scenarios, which of course is an absolute massive undertaking, and then basically the whole map add to this as well, whilst you're just trapped in this tiny little area. And that can make playing the post plant very, very difficult indeed, and feel like you're trying to have to fight out. And even times that you do get the spike, I've seen this many times in pro games where, they'll get caught out trying to escape the spike death though, and the defenders will, even if they've lost the round, manage to get an economy win by killing all the attackers as they try to escape this nightmarish B site. But there is one good way of countering this, and again it comes from a split, right? If you are attacking B, I think that this mid area here, attacking through a split, will be incredibly important. One, if obviously you've come this way as well, then you probably will have more space, right? You will have all of this space probably to yourself as well, and that will give you a lot of good potential for, helping to defend this site, because now any defender coming from here now has to check both ways, and that's going to be a lot more difficult for them. This is just another reason why I don't think full rushing B site will be that successful for you. But moreover, if you can even push someone up to here, I will guarantee that if you can get someone into this area over here, you will win most rounds just straight up, because at this point the defenders, especially if they don't know you're here, will just obviously expect this to be their safe rotation either side. Either way it is, defenders will expect that to be their safe rotation. So if you can get someone up in here, you'll probably get at least one free kill, maybe even two, and that will probably win you the round on its own. And again, if you can cut off this rotation point for the defenders, which weirdly enough, this again is perhaps one of the slight advantages attackers have, is that getting to this point isn't as hard as it is on other maps to be in the defender spawn. It's actually easier than on a lot of other maps for attackers to get to this point, and I think you should probably try and take advantage of that as much as you can by trying to get up here as often as you can to basically get as many free kills as you can, and obviously that's going to win you some rounds. So that was attacking the B site, and as I've said, it's not an easy thing to do. We should also note that the switch is here, which isn't the easiest switch to get, because even if a defender is playing somewhat passive, and doesn't want to peek you coming out of B main, they can still see the switch from a very passive angle and, can keep eyes on it. And, that's probably going to be a bit of an issue as well for you if you want to get the switch. And so now let's go on to A site, and the A site has an easier time, I will say, than the B site. Obviously, we've already noted that this orb is relatively free for attackers most of the time, and that's something that you should be taking advantage of. And as I also said before, these two choke points are kind of at a similar position. If you push here and you push here at the same time, you'll be fighting at the same time. Normally most people will be able to recognize, when the push should come, and it'll come at the right time, as opposed to on B where it can be a bit disjointed sometimes. And also, in general, the A site obviously gives you more space than the B site does to maneuver around in once you actually take control of it. Obviously, you can play under hell. You have a safe place to retreat to, which is unlike B site. You can't just retreat back to your spawn oftentimes because you could very easily be caught trying to get back there. Whereas on A site, you have a nice easy time getting back to what should be a safe location. And in general, I think that rushing A site will probably bring a lot more success than doing it on B site will, not just because of the post plant that I just talked about, but again because the switch is much easier to get to, so you can cut off one of the main angles much more easily than you can on B without necessarily anyone looking at it. They might do, but with just a quick piece of utility, or this is a common smoke point of course as well, you should be able to close this door pretty easily, and that will hopefully give you the space and time that you need to get the spike down on A. And so I don't necessarily hate nearly as much as I do on B a full push. I don't think it's nearly as bad as it is on B site, but obviously I still wouldn't recommend that being, your main go-to play on A, because as I've mentioned, mid is an incredibly important part of this map, and so you should be taking mid control. And once you have mid control, you probably will want to be looking at coordinated pushes, doing both of these at both times, which of course can cause some chaos for defenders. What does a defender here do? Who do they aim for? You can normally, catch them from multiple angles and cause chaos for them. But in general, I do think that A site is more simple than B site, because unlike I mentioned, actually getting up here and cutting off rotations is quite easy, and you can still do this actually for A site as well. You can do it when the defenders are trying to rotate this way as well. You can still use this area to cut off their rotations, which again will be very successful for you. But, you know, it is much harder, I would say. Whereas this push up here, as opposed to going that way, I would say is quite easy for attackers and not too difficult to pull off a lot of the times. This push into here, I think, is often quite dangerous. It's not an easy push to make. It's not something that I think often finds much success. Obviously, you have the glass here on this window, which, you know, will alert anyone playing, anyone playing here that, you are coming towards them straight away. And normally the glass won't be broken, although sometimes people do, and I don't really know why. But this push in general, normally isn't the best place to be. Normally people will start becoming aware and pull their gun back out around here if they're rotating to this side. So even if you do manage to push around here, you can still lose that gunfight. And that's why this, I think, is a more successful area to catch rotations off in, because people won't have their gun. In this area, the defenders generally won't have their gun out, and they'll just be running across to the other side. And so you can catch free kills here, whereas with this push, you still probably won't even catch a free kill necessarily. And so this push in general, I don't think is that successful, and that probably means that, just generally pushing a site will probably be more fruitful for you in the long term. And so that was just a quick understanding of Ascent and trying to attack. Key takeaways would be from me, obviously trying to take this mid control as early and often as you can, as then you can really, go whatever way you want on the map and kind of think about, surprising your opponents in different ways. Full rushing B site probably isn't going to go too well for you. Gaining this space here towards the defender spawn, if you can get there, will be very successful for you though, however, and will probably lend you a free round win in a lot of times. And generally A site will be more simplistic than B site, and you probably will find more success just really going towards A site from both sides, as the push up towards spawn won't probably be as successful for you. And I hope you found that very helpful. As I said, I will be doing this for all of the maps going in alphabetical order, so we'll take a look at all of them and talk about the differences between each map.